Hello and welcome to another exciting episode of Can It Take a K26, the show where we take a variety of blasters and see if they can be upgraded using a K26 spring. I am your host, Captain Xavier, and today we're going to be looking at a number of multi-cylinder revolvers, or revolvers, if you please. Our first contestant is the Xshot XS. The XS is apparently one of the earlier multi-cylinder revolvers, though unlike the Nerf ones, it has manual rotation. You just have to flip it over and move on to the next one. Prime is from the top, pull the trigger, fire. It doesn't appear to have an air restrictor, though it may just be that these ones were taken out. I have no idea. This was a Goodwill find after all. It also has one interesting feature. It features a disc shooter on the top, so you can fire darts and discs, or just darts, depending on your preference, which is a neat little feature, though somewhat excessive. Excess. I'm funny. All right, let's see if this thing can take a K26. So it is direct plunger, which is good. And it is direct prime rather than offset prime, which is also good. It is a hollow plunger rod, which is not usually the best. That's an interesting catch mechanism too. Original spring is easy to get off, and it's about the same size as K26, if a little bit higher frequency and thinner wire, so compression might be an issue. Looking at where the catch is, though, I don't think it will be. Alright, well, K26 fit. Let's button it up and see if it will catch, or if the whole thing will just shatter the first time I fire it. Alright! Well, turns out the Xshot XS can take a K26, and it actually makes it shoot quite beautifully. I once again, unfortunately, failed to get the before readings because it's like 95 degrees outside, and I didn't want to be wandering around my alley picking up darts. But it's definitely an improvement. It could probably going to need a little bit of work. I doubt it will last very long because the Xshot plastic is a little bit more brittle, which means it will probably eventually crack the internals, and if you ever dry fired it, heaven help you. But it can, in fact, take a K26, which means it can definitely take a lesser spring upgrade. The fact that you have to manually rotate the cylinder isn't great. The fact that it also shoots discs, I think, is neat. But, yeah, it can take a K26. On to the next contestant. Our next contestant is the Flip Fury. The Flip Fury was originally released in 2015 as part of the Zombie Strike line, and it is basically Nerf's take on the XS. The big feature that it has that the XS does not is it has a secondary trigger that rotates the cylinder. Other than that, it's essentially a strong arm. It has the same basic priming mechanism, rotates after trigger pull, does have slam fire, which unfortunately all these things do not bode well for it being able to take K26. Though the strong arm was capable of taking it, it didn't last very long. The slam fire mechanism is kind of weak. But let's take a look at this one and see if it fares any better. Well, unsurprisingly, other than the cylinder rotator, the internals look just like a strong arm. So yes, it will fit a K26, and it will probably be able to catch a K26, but the slam fire mechanism is gonna break because these little tabs are all that is connecting to the priming mechanism, and they will eventually snap off, and they'll do so fairly quickly. You're much better off just getting one of the aftermarket spring upgrades that people have for the strong arm and putting that in here. So, yes, it'll take a K26, but it's going to break it, so I'm not going to try it. So, let's button it up and move on! Our next contestant is another commonly requested one, the Dominator. The Dominator was also released in 2015 as part of the Zombie Strike line. It has 4 6-round cylinders that are, in fact, identical to strong arm cylinders. Well, not identical, but are interchangeable with strong arm cylinders. And they're also great for absolvers. It is front pump, with slam fire, which is actually pretty cool. And it has also a secondary trigger that rotates the cylinder of cylinders, which is also pretty neat. I always kind of liked the design, and there's a lot of aspects of it that I'm actually very fond of. It was, of course, plagued with being overly complicated. It was very difficult to tell if the cylinder that you had just rotated actually had any darts in it, and it was hard to tell if the part of the cylinder that you'd rotated had darts in it. So there was a fairly common risk of rotating to an empty cylinder and getting yourself, you know, mauled by zombies because you're out of ammo. But as far as revolvers go, it does have a fairly high capacity and is really, really neat. One of the features that I very much applaud Nerf for is the fact that the priming handle is ambidextrous. You can move it to the side, you can have it on the bottom, you can move it to either side, which is really, really neat because I definitely prefer it on the side as opposed to underneath, given how bulky the cylinder is and kind of gets in the way of your hand. So that sort of ambidextrous thinking I very much approve of. But let's get this thing open and see if it can take a K26. Now, my first thought was that this was just going to be essentially another strong arm reshell, but it has a very different and much more robust catch mechanism, so I'm gonna go ahead and give it a try. Look at that! A section of K26, exactly the right length, left over from the last one. One of the things I absolutely love about doing this series is every once in a while my initial guess is completely wrong. I expect the Dominator to fail because I thought the internals were just going to be a strong arm. They are not. They're actually much more robust than I was expecting, and as a result it turns out the Dominator can take a K26. And takes it quite well. You can actually still slam fire it. Your arm's going to get a little tired if you're going to be slam firing a lot because that is a fairly stout prime. But, yeah, it can take it. I am impressed. I am very surprised. It doesn't solve the other issues, the feed issues and all of that, but it does finally give you a decent amount of power. So, for those of you that really want to field a Dominator with a little bit more kick to it, it can take a K26 and therefore any number of other spring upgrades. So, on to the final contestant. Our final contestant is the Rebel Flipside bow. The Flipside bow was released in 2016 as part of the Rebel line. And like the other revolving revolvers, it has a trigger that rotates the cylinder, though like most of the current bows, it doesn't actually have a catch. So there is no firing trigger, you simply pull back and let go. Once again, the brace height is ridiculously low, so the thing does kind of flip you in the back of the wrist unless you... Supposedly there's some odd technique that you can use to keep it from doing that. Best thing to do is just get yourself a bracer, an archery bracer. Unlike most of the other bows, in fact I think all of the other bows that have the similar mechanism, it draws from the top instead of from the bottom, and I don't know if that's going to make a difference, but we're going to find out. So we're going to pop this thing open and see if it can take a K26, and hopefully I don't have to take out every screw in this thing because there's a lot of them. Alright, well, I'm not surprised that it fit, but the real question is, will I be able to actually draw it enough for it to fire with any amount of useful force? It does have a cam, or at least a roller, if not an actual true compound cam, but it doesn't have the same mechanism that the Stratabow had, which is what I believe was the deciding factor on allowing that one to take K26. But we won't know until we get it back together. It does have very stout bow arms, so that is definitely a plus. But are they stout enough? appear not. I'm not able to get enough of a draw to get the cylinder to properly rotate, because it rotates on draw, partially. I think it partially rotates when you start drawing and completes the rotation when you get a full draw, but I'm not getting a full draw, so the cylinder is actually ending up in the middle, and so it's not properly working. Yeah. Nope, unfortunately the little cam that's up here is not giving enough mechanical advantage for you to get a proper draw like the Stratobow's large winding one. So, unfortunately it looks like the Flipside bow cannot take a K26. Tragic. Let's recap. Alright, for those of you keeping score at home or who just skipped to the end to see the results, that was a yes for the Xshot XS. That was a no for the Flip Fury. Technically a yes, since it is the same as a strong arm, which can, but it'll probably break after about 5 shots, so I don't recommend it. That was a yes for the Dominator, and that was a no for the Flipside bow. I was slightly surprised with some of the results. Kind of surprised that this one was able to catch. This one didn't surprise me at all. This one actually surprised me quite a bit, and I'm very pleased with it. And this one doesn't really surprise me, as most of the drawstring bows didn't work because not enough mechanical advantage to pull the spring. But I think some of these could be a lot of fun with the right updates. I'd kind of like to get some of the discs for this and see how well they fire on a K26. Be a little bit worried to fire it without the darts, as there's no air restrictor and it would probably shatter something on the inside. This one I'm actually looking forward to possibly running at some point with the K26 just to see how well it actually fires in combat. But yeah, I've got most of the rest of this season lined up, but go ahead and continue to put your questions and suggestions and so forth in the comment section below. A reminder, story time with Captain Xavier is now being posted over on my Lego channel, because I'm illustrating it with Lego, and that is going to be a lot of fun to do, and I hope you guys will actually enjoy it. If you're interested in acquiring K26, you can get it at Out of Darts' Etsy page. That's where I recommend getting it. He's got good prices, and it's always good to support a fellow modder. So, there you have it. I hope this was helpful, and thank you for watching.